Hey everyone, is it good news when Israel kills Iranian leaders? It's a trick question. According to the media, there can't be any good news in the Iran war. Here's a typical NBC News headline from the other day. Israel killed another Iranian leader, but experts say that doesn't mean it's winning the war. I'm Rich Lowry of National Review, and look, big things have gone wrong in this war. Obviously, Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed by the Iranians. They've been hitting energy infrastructure in Gulf states allied to the United States. Both of these are big deals. Both deserve analysis and coverage. So I don't want uniformly positive coverage of this war, but I also don't want uniformly negative coverage of this war. Neither would be accurate, neither would serve the public. But what we've seen from the legacy media is overwhelmingly negative coverage. I want to delve into that and what's going on. Let's first look a little bit more at this NBC News story that I cited at the top. Now, experts say, as we saw in that headline, it's one of the great tropes and dodges of legacy media because it depends on which experts you're talking to, right? Because on most questions, you get experts all over the map. But if you just consult one pool of experts with whom you share key assumptions, you can launder your point of view, your worldview through experts. And here, and in most of the coverage we've seen of this war, the experts are establishment foreign policy types who are hostile to Donald Trump and inclined to have a negative view of what's happening, which is what the media wants. So what are the experts saying in this NBC piece? Well, here's one, a guy named Michael Stevens, who's at a London-based think tank. Larijani is a big scalp, he concedes. It's impressive what Israel is able to do. They promised they'd hit the regime, and they're doing it very successfully. But from a global perspective, you have to ask, so what? Here's another one from a senior policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. If you look at how the assassination of Ali Khamenei empowered the most hardline and security elements within the Islamic Republic of Iran, then Larijani's death could act as an accelerator to that path. One of the many hats worn by the pragmatist Larijani was his role as a leading negotiator with Washington. Israel seems to be turning its attention to targeting those who push for a political solution to overcome Iran's troubles at home and abroad. Yes, these poor Iranian moderates getting targeted by Israel. But there's another expert in this story. Let's go to this real quick before I move on. The targeted killings will likely hamper the effectiveness of Iran's internal operations, according to Michael Horowitz, a geopolitical and security analyst. They can scramble command, slow decision-making, force successors into hiding, and demoralize both leadership and foot soldiers alike. Now, if you wanted to, you could take the Horowitz quote, add another expert like-minded with him, and have a headline saying Larijani killing likely to demoralize regime and slow its decision-making. Experts say. But that's not the headline that NBC News wanted. That's a headline that basically no one in the legacy media wants. This is how the New York Times played Larijani's death. Israel is picking off Iran's leadership, but decapitation has its limits. Ali Larijani's death highlighted how heavily Israel is relying on targeted killings to achieve its war aims. That approach can backfire. Well, of course, this approach could backfire because it's a truism that any approach could backfire. If Israel weren't killing Iran's top leaders at the same time we are in the midst of a major war against Iran, that could backfire. If we sent ground troops to assure that we changed the regime in Tehran, that obviously certainly could backfire. So you are making a choice as a news editor. Do you want to emphasize the positive? Because actually, approaches work sometimes as well as fail, or do you want to emphasize the negative, the potential failure? And overwhelmingly, that is what the press is doing, and the New York Times especially is doing. I pay a lot of attention to the New York Times. They have a lot of good journalists. You got to know what they're saying to know what's driving the debate, what the establishment is thinking, and I scroll through all these Iran war headlines they have every single day. They have a lot of them, and they almost are all negative. Check out this other one from the other day. For U.S., unmet expectations in Iran fit a familiar pattern in the region. Iran's military retaliation, along with the political defiance of its new leaders, evokes a decades-old pattern of unrealized goals for American interventions in the region. Unmet expectations, this headline ran when we were 2.5 weeks into the war. No one can be certain how this thing ends. For all we know, tomorrow there could be a popular revolt resulting in a better Iranian government. I don't think that outcome is likely. I don't think that scenario is very likely. It also could be a total disaster where we can't reopen the strait. militarily and there's a global recession. I also think that outcome is unlikely, or it could be something in between. But you'd think you have to find out first before declaring how there are all these unmet expectations after like 17 days, right? This is a prediction and an opinion about what's happening rather than reporting the facts of what's happening. And it is incredibly premature. And we saw another example of this. In fairness, this was in the opinion section, but this really goes to the mindset. Another New York Times headline. It's a Nicholas Kristof column, How Trump Should Extricate Himself from His Iran Quagmire. After 2.5 weeks, it's mind-blowing. So that word became associated with the Vietnam War, which lasted about 8 years. We lost more than 50,000 killed in action in Vietnam. The second Iraq War lasted about 8 years. Now there are follow-on conflicts after that. Obviously, major ground forces committed major casualties. Same thing with Afghanistan, lasts about 20 years. You can characterize, if you want, all of those wars as quagmires. But how, after, when this column was running, less than 21 days, can you call the Iran war a quagmire? So what's going on here? Well, one, ever since Walter Cronkite, the legendary CBS anchor, pronounced the Vietnam War unwinnable, famously, during that conflict, the media has it as part of its DNA to be skeptical or hostile about U.S. military operations. That hasn't been the case through all of U.S. history, but since Cronkite and Vietnam, it has, with some exceptions. First Gulf War would be one. Two, the media hates Donald Trump, hates everything about him, hates everything he does. So you add up those two factors, and you are going to get this overwhelmingly hostile depiction of the Iran war that doesn't accord with reality, right? We've conducted something like 16,000 strikes in Iran with Israel. Only one U.S. plane, an F-35, has been hit apparently by Iranian fire, a partial hit that resulted in emergency landing. That's extraordinary. We have total air dominance. We're hitting the missile sites. We're hitting the launchers. We're hitting the ability of the Iranian regime to remake these things. And we're beginning to undertake the effort, after sinking the Iranian Navy, to create the conditions for military convoys in the Strait of Hormuz by hitting cruise missile sites on the shores and by going after Iranian fast boats and other assets. So all that is to the good. Now, are there bad things going on as well? Yes, of course. The Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed. I have no problem with the media covering that. The media should cover that, and the economic turmoil, resulting economic turmoil in Asia, the escalating price of crude oil, higher gas prices here at home. All that is fair game. But the media were playing it straight. That New York Times feed of headlines I mentioned earlier, some percentage of it would be positive, an equal percentage of it would be negative, and a lot of it would be in between. No one would have a problem with that. But the media can't bring itself to make a fair and objective assessment of this war, and that's true of so many other things in our national life at the moment. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.